let's get to some of the dissent by Scalia, because, you know, there's always going to be a part of the population. I mean, look, there's still people who still apparently have a problem with this whole thing where we don't have slaves. I mean, there's so it's certainly inevitable. Scalia writes, let's get to that, the question of the 14th Amendment. Scalia in the dissent writes at one point, when the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868, every state limited marriage to one man and one woman. And no one doubted the constitutionality of doing so. That resolves these cases. Now, of course, at that time, interracial marriage was banned. And at that time, women were the property of their husbands. In fact, in both those instances, there was laws to that effect on the books as recently, I don't know, it's 15, 20 years ago. I think it wasn't until, 20 years ago, maybe the last women are chattel of their husband laws were stripped of the books. I think it's quite possible to actually, I don't know if when my parents got married, my mom was allowed to have a credit card in her own name. I certainly know that, like, I remember in my teens growing up in Worcester where the clerk of the Board of Elections had a problem with women using their birth last name if they were married to vote. I mean, let's get real here. You can't use that as a standard unless you're Anton Scalia. At one point, Scalia writes, let me see if I can find this here. There were 4 separate dissents, I believe, in this in the Obergefell versus Hodges case. I think Scalia joined all of the dissents. They had a problem with all of it. I joined the Chief Justice opinion in full, that being Roberts. So maybe it's appropriate I just read one paragraph of Roberts. If you are among, this is from Roberts' dissent, the last paragraph. If you are among the many Americans of whatever sexual orientation who favor expanding same-sex marriage, by all means, celebrate today's decision. Celebrate the achievement of a desired goal. Celebrate the opportunity for a new expression of commitment to a partner. Celebrate the availability of new benefits. But do not celebrate the Constitution. It had nothing to do with it. I respectfully dissent. And again, the Constitution does not, as far as I know, mention the word marriage at all. No one has the right to get married under the Constitution. However, if government is going to recognize the marriage of 2 people, it has to recognize the marriage of other people, unless there's some type of, overarching, compelling state need not to. And that's what equal protection under the law means. So here's Scalia. I join the Chief Justice's opinion in full. I write separately to call attention to this court's threat to American democracy. if it is of overwhelming importance. Okay, well, here he says, the substance of today's decree is not of immense personal importance to me. The substance is not. It is of overwhelming importance, however, who it is that rules me. Today's decree says that my ruler, capital R, and the ruler, capital R, of 320 million Americans coast to coast is a majority of the 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. It's as if it's the first time he's recognized the role of the 9 lawyers of the Supreme Court. Maybe he has a problem with them all being lawyers, which I think is actually, he's on something. I don't know if he also remembers the 2000 election, but that was a long time ago. Until the courts put a stop to it, public debate over same-sex marriage displayed American democracy at its best. The irony of him writing this when they stopped the vote counting in 2000 in Florida is, well, I wouldn't say delicious. Prominent. No matter what it was the people ratified, the 14th Amendment protects those rights that the judiciary in its reasoned judgment thinks the 14th Amendment ought to protect. So he's saying, I guess what he's saying is that the 14th Amendment is subject to a referendum by Americans and not by a referendum of judges, which has not been the way that the 14th Amendment has been applied up until in every other decision up until this moment. The nature of marriage is that through its enduring bond, 2 persons together can find other freedoms such as expression, intimacy, and spirituality. And then he quotes from Kennedy's opinion. And he writes, really? Whoever thought that intimacy and spirituality, whatever that means, were freedoms? And if intimacy is, one would think freedom of intimacy is abridged rather than expanded by marriage. In other words, you're supposed to be monogamous. And then he adds, ask the nearest hippie. Now, I think this is genuine evidence of a guy who is now sort of like moved into, I don't know if he used too much, aluminum in his deodorant or what it was, but what he's referring to there, and I'm going to explain this to people because I don't even know if you guys get it. Well, you get it. Noah may not get it. There was this thing 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago. Well, I guess actually like 47. Somewhere level is 68, right? Where there was free love with these hippies. And Scalia is still pissed about it. Ask the nearest hippie if marriage hasn't abridged. It's just, wow.
So you're saying whatever like far out groovy girl Scalia was into back in those days, not inviting him to Woodstock is why we've had to deal with him all these years?
Yep.
I see. That's a fair angle.
They all called me square. And I didn't get to go to Woodstock. So there it is. It is Pride marches all across the country this weekend. And so it's going to be pretty crazy. And let me just add this one thing. And this is something, hopefully we talk to Ian on Monday. I'm going to ask him about. But there's still a lot of states in this country, I don't know how many off the top of my head, where you can be fired simply for being gay. Simply for being gay, you can be fired. Which needs to be fixed. I'm curious as to what the implications are if someone is married and they are fired because they are gay. If the fact that they're married becomes the basis for the employer to know that they're gay if they get protection because of their marital status. I mean, that's, you know, that's some small bore sort of parsing stuff there. But we should also tell you that everyone except for Lindsey Graham and Jeb Bush have, in the Republican race, at this point, I think, although I don't know if Donald Trump has. I'd be surprised. It'll be interesting to see when they all come out for the constitutional amendment to outlaw gay marriage, which I got news for you is not going to happen. It's been a very good week for Republican fundraising. But which generally means it's been a very good week for human dignity and for the rest of the, for the country as a whole.